Free Range Texan promo, 30 seconds.
This is Michael Shawn, host of the Free Range Texan podcast, with special features like our Heroes and Heroines file, or Free Range Talent file, or one that really generates a lot of buzz, our Unexplained files. And almost every show ends up with you and I sitting by the campfire. The thing about Free Range Texan podcast is that 30 seconds is just not enough time.
Oops, sorry about that, Michael.
7.
Start the clock.
6.
Stand by, Eddie Bay 1.
5.
Stand by, Sweetie Pie.
4.
Bring studio mics hot.
3.
Stand by, Michael Shawn.
2.
Roll music.
1.
Well, howdy, y'all. The Free Range Texan podcast is underway. This here program is a special look at the way life is shaping up for folks in the U.S. of A., seen through the eyes of a born and bred West Texan. Our host is a veteran broadcaster who is known for his campfire visits on radio. Michael Shawn is standing by. So here he is, our host, a real Free Range Texan himself, Michael Shawn.
Now, before we get underway, taking business here seriously, I'd just like to know the answer to one question. Did those people pay anything to get in here? I told you guys you can't do that. Oh, episode number 6. We've been invited back 6 times already. These showbiz people, they cancel shows a lot. Hey, we got a fun lineup for you on this podcast program. A lot of interesting stuff went up on the blog. If you're not attending the blog at freerangetexan.net, you're missing out. There's not enough time to put everything on the show, and we had some stuff come in between this time and last time that, well, you just need to go see it. I've been looking forward to this. We are introducing a brand new segment on our podcast, Free Range Talent, and it's about time, don't you think? Oh, I have a gentleman that I have known for about a kabillion years. This guy I've known all my life. He is a great guy. He is a singer-songwriter, and he's an example of true Texas music. And Stan Troy is going to be on the show. He's got a brand new CD out. Also, if you remember back a couple of weeks ago on our last podcast, we took you to Santigo Peak in the Big Bend Wilderness, and we got a follow-up story about kind of a, well, fun thing that happened down there on top of Santigo Peak, and we'll be talking about that coming up here in just a few minutes. Also, have you heard the latest news about the Crystal Clear Rio Grande Mariachi Band? They got a bus, and those guys have hit the road. They were on our show last time, and the calls came in. People found out about them. These guys are booked. They're on a big tour all across West Texas. They couldn't even show up for the show today. And on our website at freerangetexan.net, there's a picture of that show bus they've got. You have to go see that. Now, before we go any further, let me remind you folks that there has been activity on our blog that is a little bit unusual. Here's why you should know. Go to the blog and the whole story will unfold. Have you heard about the blue orbs that are appearing in the sky in different places? They are now happening in Texas. Not a word on media, mainstream or social, either one, but you're going to hear about it here because I have an eyewitness account and, better yet, pictures. FreeRangeTexan.net. Oh yes, and now, as promised, recently I told you about Santigo Peak down in Brewster County, Texas. But I didn't have time to tell you about Progress City, a non-existent town in Brewster County, invented by swindlers to dupe residents of other parts of Texas into buying town lots. On February 8th, 1910, a Brewster County grand jury called the plot to the attention of Judge W.C. Douglas of the Brewster County District Court in Alpine. The grand jury reported with deep regret the presence of an outfit called Progress City Town and Site Company, which seemed to be an organization designed to swindle unsuspecting citizens by the sale of so-called town lots in an imaginary town, Progress City. You see, Progress City was on Santiago Mountain, about 40 miles southeast of Alpine. According to the grand jury, accessible only by horseback and a long, difficult, and little-used trail, and was totally uninhabited, and for that matter, uninhabitable. Described as wholly unfit and of no use whatsoever, the Progress City Town Site Company consisted of John L. Mock as president and Lee R. Davis, who acquired the title to the land, along with William Poole, part owner and secretary. By the time the grand jury reported all of this to the judge, the three had already sold more than 1,000 lots, usually for $1.50 apiece. Though the price itself was of little concern to an individual buyer, it was pointed out that it would add up to a substantial amount for that day and time. The grand jury went on to say in their report that they admitted that the prosecution of Mock and Davis was probably pointless because the way the law read was that each swindle constituted a separate offense. And because the perpetrators almost certainly acted through agents to avoid legal entanglements, the grand jury did, however, recommend making clear to the public the innocence of the people of Brewster County in the matter, and sent a copy of the report to each district court in several other counties. I know what you're thinking. Maybe, just maybe, you didn't need to know all of that. Except if you're ever passing through Alpine, Texas, just for fun, you may want to go to the Brewster County Courthouse, where on the wall they have posted and framed the official plat, the drawing, the map of the proposed lots available in Progress City, Texas, supposedly located at the very top of Santiago Peak, in the wilderness of the Big Bend. It's time now for another segment of Free Range Talent, brought to you by A-Team PR, bringing a host of creative media production and public relations services to our exclusive list of clients. Maybe you could hire the A-Team. And now, here's the next segment of Free Range Talent. One of the best things that we do on Free Range Texan is we get a chance to talk to great talent. I'm talking to a guy that I've known since I was a young kid. We have Stan Troy on the Free Range Texan podcast with us. How you doing, Stan?
I'm doing good. How about you, Michael?
I'm just all excited. We're here to interview you, and not to interview me, but I want to tell a story right quick. When we were both very young, I'm thinking maybe 15, 16 years old and maybe younger. We grew up in the same town, and we were buddies. You called me on the phone one day and said, "You got to come over to my house. You've got to come over to my house." You said, "I've got something, and you got to hear it." And I went over to your house that day and walked in, and you had a copy of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and it was the first time I had ever seen it, and probably one of the few that was even available in our county yet, but you'd gotten a hold of it. You know, it turns out all these decades later, that was a turning point in hit music. That was for everything from the cover art to the actual music itself. None of us had heard anything like that before. But Stan Troy was the type of guy, even back then, to immediately pick up on that and say, "Man, you got to come over. You got to hear this album." And do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Now that you're shaking my memory, I sure do. That was a wild day and a wild time.
It was, Stan. And so this is kind of a little dream come true to get a chance to interview you now. Well, dear friend, you have been writing music, and you've got your new project, Deluxe Cafe, that you've just tied the ribbon on, and I've got a copy of it right here in front of me. Now, all of that, those are your songs, aren't they?
They are. I wrote every one of them. Sure did.
What was your inspiration for Deluxe Cafe?
Deluxe Cafe is a compilation. It's a collection of songs, because when you listen to that record, well, Michael, you know the songs are kind of different from each other. On one hand,
Yes.
It's country. It's all country, but it's not all steel guitars either. And so putting things together, taking those songs that are different from each other, one of the songs on that record is called "You Already Know." And the first line in that is, "At the Deluxe Cafe, you pour me coffee." And it hit me as I was thinking about what to entitle this album, that this collection is kind of like looking at the selections at a cafe and wondering, what do you want next? Well, that's kind of how this record is. You can listen to one song or another song and put it all together, and it's kind of like that menu. Deluxe Cafe was a real cafe in Fredericksburg, Texas, where I would hang out, and sometimes the waitresses there would feel a little sorry for me because I was skinny and single, and they'd feed me donuts when nobody was looking.
Oh, and we might remind our listeners that you are still slim and trim, but no longer single.
That's true. Been married to Vicki for 34 years. Thank the Lord for that. We live out on her home place where she grew up in the hills east of Fredericksburg.
Well, and for the people that don't know, that Fredericksburg area is right in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, and is would be kind of a dreamy place to live, but also a great place for a singer-songwriter like you, Stan, to get just tons of inspiration. You wrote a song about the Panhandle fires, and we have a lot of listeners that may not know immediately what we're talking about, but they were a tragic circumstance that took place where a number of ranches burned in a gigantic prairie fire in the panhandle of West Texas, including the ranch of John Erickson and his wife. And for people who don't know who that is the author of all of the Hank the Cowdog books. This is the Dr. Seuss of Texas. John Erickson, and his home burned to the ground, but he and his wife fortunately escaped all of that, but he lost all of his personal possessions in that fire. But how did it come around that you heard about that?
I was laid up at home, couldn't leave the house, and as I was watching the news, it was on March the 7th, 2017. The local news mentioned the fires in the Panhandle, and it got my attention. I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, and I still have a fondness there. I think that Lubbock probably formed me as much or more than any other place that I lived. And it caught my attention, and the next day I was listening to the news and wanted to hear more about it. But I didn't. We're a long way from Lubbock down here. I went on the internet and began to follow the story, and so it didn't get better. But I started writing down the details of the story as they were coming across the news from Lubbock and Amarillo. Pretty soon I knew that I needed to write a song about that. I don't know if I knew or if the song just started coming to me, and I started putting these things into a rhyme and into a tune. And so that's how this song came to be.
Tell me a little bit about you learning or developing your art of songwriting. How did that come about? Did you have some particular people that inspired you?
Yes, I did. I'd be remiss not to, first of all, say something about my dad and how he used to play country music in the house and on the radio and on trips from Lubbock to Dallas to see family and coming back again. And music just got into me, country music in particular. And I was starting to write when I met a fellow named Daryl Stetler in 2008. I was living and working in Llano, and that's where Daryl still lives. He heard a little of my music, and he said, "Stan, you could write if somebody would help you." And I said, "Will you?" The reason I asked him is that because I already knew that he'd written for George Strait, that he had a number one with George called A Fire I Can't Put Out. He'd written for Loretta Lynn and Lefty Frizzell and the Wilburn Brothers and the Osborne Brothers. And when he told me that I could write if somebody had helped me, then I said, "Will you?" And he cursed immediately. And then he said, "Stan, it'll be brutal." I said, "Okay." I didn't mind. He proceeded to put me through what he called Nashville Songwriting 101. And it was brutal. But the things that he taught me have stayed with me. So that when I came to writing a song like Panhandle Hell, and I feel like the song came together, remember and honor those folks who gave everything that they had in that tragedy.
Stan Troy, it is a pleasure to have you on our Free Range Texan podcast.
I've enjoyed this conversation today, Michael.
And here's Stan Troy and Panhandle Hell.
Wildfire in Panhandle, Texas is burning, 500,000 acres in smoke. Find the horses and cattle and ride hard to turn them and get out before we all choke. How it all started, ain't no one can figure. The wind blew straight out of the north. It kicked up a spark and jumped the last river and left the land naked and scorched. The devil rides high through a red Texas sky. We spur fast horses, but none ride away. Good hands lie dead with 3,000 head on that day. Hell came to play. One horse was just me and my lady. We saved every head that we could. Now my ride is a hearse, my gravestone says Cody. It wasn't for naught but for good. And Cade was a father, but he didn't know his bride had not yet shared the news. Flames burning hotter, left nowhere to go. He fought but could not break through. Devil rides high through a red Texas sky. We spur fast horses, but none ride away. Good hands lie dead with 3,000 head on that day. Hell came to play. Finally the wind ceased its dark desolation, and this I have now come to see. That cold, bitter end had one consolation. Reward was all in the deed. And the devil rides high through a red Texas sky. We spur fast horses, but none ride away. Good hands lie dead with 3,000 head on that day. Hell came to play. The devil rides high through a red Texas sky. We spur fast horses, but none ride away. Good hands lie dead with 3,000 head on that day. Hell came to play. Good hands lie dead with 3,000 head on that day. Hell came to play.
You've been listening to the Free Range Talent File. If you'd like more information about our guests, just go to our website at freerangetexan.net. Also, submissions to be interviewed on our program can also be submitted on freerangetexan.net. Now, I'm just going to suggest that you hear me now and believe me later. Listen to what I'm telling you, and you'll see what I mean. Now, if you're shopping for a gift for any occasion, let me save you some time and clue you in to find the perfect something for that hard-to-buy person on your list. We've all got them. Dare I mention a state of Texas scented candle with the scent of ruby red grapefruits and the hint of leather, and your personal message going to be displayed on the candle lid? Or maybe I could tell you about our all-natural Texas wildflower honey. And we have Texas chili. Now, I'm warning you folks in California, this chili has no beans. But Texas chili is so good, they actually named a state after it. And like all great chili, it's beanless. It's rumored to make cowboys handsome and cowgirls glow, but beyond that, did I mention that Texas chili has no beans? I know what a lot of you are thinking. Where do we find this stuff? Well, it's all waiting for you. Right now, right this minute, as long as they don't run out. freerangetexan.net. I will unashamedly tell you that it helps support our Free Range Texan podcast. So, enjoy. Oh, yes, and while you're on that freerangetexan.net website, you should take a look at our podcast blog. Oh, sure, you can see UFOs and Bigfoot stuff and lots of behind-the-scenes stuff about our program. But holy guacamole, you can even see a picture of a cryptozoology investigator. Well, you don't see that every day. freerangetexan.net. You tell them Michael sent you. Well, get your outside clothes on. We're going to the campfire. Next. Hi, this is Michael Shawn. Welcome to the Campfire. This is a story first told to me by Donald Harry Roberts. I used to be a marshal in my younger days, and so naturally, when I saw a wanted poster recently on a fellow wanted dead or alive, it caught my eye. Now, this fella's name on the poster was Bad Bob Hughes. Originally a kid whose daddy drank away the farm and left he and his ma penniless. He grew up hanging around saloons, and it wasn't long before the bank foreclosed on his farm, leaving Bob and his ma high and dry. It wasn't long after that Mrs. Hughes got laid out in a pine box. Well, after that, he spent his days working at the livery and practicing his quick draw. 6 months later, Bad Bob Hughes robbed the Laredo Bank and gunned down the sheriff. He got away with $3,000 in the sheriff's horse and saddle. He became a legendary quick-draw killer, and the reward for his capture, dead or alive, grew every time someone else got killed. Well, now, it turned out that Bob Hughes came around in a great big circle and landed right back in Laredo. And as usual, he was forcing folks to pay up for protection, which was really only good for protecting them from him. The only time anyone saw him soften is the day he went to his mother's grave, after which he marched back into town, shot the banker who foreclosed on his ma's farm. Well, after that, Bob hauled off and killed one of the ladies at the saloon, a young lady who got forced into the business, you might say, because a year earlier, Bob had shot her father dead and her ma died of a broken heart. I dug out my six-shooter. I'd become a quiet fella, and that's the way folks knew me, and had pretty much forgotten that I used to be a sharpshooting federal marshal. I was about to head into Laredo when I noticed a plate of iron about 1.5 feet square laying on the ground by the barn. I tied it, covering my chest and belly. Most gunslingers shoot for the biggest part of the body, you see. I climbed up on my old mule and rode in. It was mid-morning. Everything was pretty quiet. I tied up my mule in front of the general store, and I walked towards the saloon. As I neared the swinging doors, I yelled out, "Bad Bob Hughes! This is the marshal! Show your face!" All dressed in black, he walked out and started to laugh. "Okay, man, I ain't killed no one before lunch in a while." He stepped out into the street and put his back to the sun. It actually caused me to have a nice dark silhouette to shoot towards. He took his stance, looked at me with his steely eyes. "Any time, Mr. Marshal Man," he teased. I had learned years ago that waiting makes lowlifes like Bob nervous. I wanted him to draw first, and he did, twice as fast as I could have ever drawn. But bullet met iron and barely knocked me back half a step. I leveled my six-shooter and fired, hitting Bob Hughes in the left eye. He stood there, stunned, and crashed face first to the dust. I holstered my pistol and started back to my mule. I didn't have the heart to tell them good folks in Laredo that I had just shot my grandson. His ma, being my daughter, never knew. I'm Michael Shawn. Another great tale around the campfire here. Thanks for joining us. Adios, my friends. Thanks a million to Stan Troy for being on the show. And his album, Deluxe Cafe, you can find that on freerangetexan.net. We'll see you next time. Take us home, sweetie pie.
Y'all been listening to the Free Range Texan podcast. If you'd like more information about our show or where to find the products we talked about on Free Range Texan, visit our website at freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. Free Range Texan is produced out yonder at 18 PR Studios. Speaking for Michael Shawn and the rest of our crew, this is Sweetie Pie, and we'll see you next time on the Free Range Texan podcast.